Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca, and I, along with Vivian and Shady, will talk about the biases involved in junk food advertisements and its effects on vulnerable populations like children and how it could contribute to obesity, which is a very big public health problem.
As children, watching Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, we didn't pay much attention to commercials. What would it do to our wallets or even our health? All we saw was colorful food, animal mascots, and other children enjoying what was advertised. Being older gives us more awareness to these advertisements and the bias they pose towards the audience. But what happens when we see these advertisements? What does it imply for our health? These are the issues and ideas we will explore in this video. First, we will explore where the bias of junk food advertisement emerged from. In 1899, we see the first food company begin their advertisement in newspapers. Less than 10 years later, in 1906, cornflake advertisement is already seen in at least 6 newspapers. By 1915, the company has spent $1 million on national advertisements, correlating with the Pure and Food Drug Act that made food labels state what active ingredients were in the product. At first, as seen in the 1920s, most advertising was towards the working class. All the while, White Castle advertises on the radio, exhibiting a shift from newspaper propaganda to the radio. During the 1950s, White Castle also sponsors a children's show. This causes a shift in advertisement bias towards the working class to children. It is echoed in the late 1950s and early 1960s, where McDonald's begins advertising a clown for their mascot to appeal more to children. They even created the Happy Meal in 1979 to further this bias. In 1996, a study was done to understand such junk food advertisement biases. It was found that over 200 food commercials aimed at children were aired during a 20-hour period. That's about 10 to 12 commercials during a 1-hour children's show. By the 2000s, $3 billion a year are spent on TV advertisement towards children, focusing on breakfast cereals, candy, soft drinks, and snacks.
Now you may ask, how does advertising junk food affect the flavor-calorie associations to our body? Let's look at a theory called the Pavlovian theory of weight control. This theory explains how these strong flavor-calorie associations influence human body weight. Body set point is defined as the amount of body fat the body maintains. The body set point is dependent on the association between flavors and calories. Repeated pairings of the flavors, which is the conditioned stimulus, and calories, the unconditioned stimulus, strengthens the flavor-calorie associations. If we increase the body fat set point, this increases the appetite and further increases the consumption of junk food. To better understand how these associations are learned, we will look at the equation of the contiguity model of associative learning by Bush and Mosteller. The model of acquisition explains how learning occurs, specifically the conditioned response to the conditioned stimulus with the presence of an unconditioned stimulus. Based on the model of acquisition, we can see that through the course of acquisition over blocks of trials, conditioned response gradually increases. Therefore, repeated pairings of the CS and the US causes an increase in the CR because the associations between the CS and the US are being strengthened. This shows over the course of trials we are learning and predicting the stimulus. This equation further predicts this trial and how this is occurring. This is known as the change of associative strength in the CS. The alpha is the salience of the conditioned stimulus. The lambda is the asymptote of learning set by the US, which is 0 if there is no US and equal to 1 if there is a US. And this is the associative strength of the CS in the previous trial. Based on the formula on the previous slide, we will now use the example to better explain the association between flavor, calories, and body fat set point. Whole foods has a small alpha because it is small in flavor and therefore less salient conditioned stimulus. It is also low in calories, thus a smaller lambda and a less salient unconditioned stimulus. The combination of a small alpha and lambda causes a small increase to body fat set point. Therefore, this maintains the body fat set point. Processed and refined foods is larger in alpha because it is strong in flavor, and therefore this creates a strong conditioned stimulus, contributing to a larger alpha. In addition, these foods contain a large amount of calories, thus a more salient unconditioned stimulus and a larger lambda value. This causes a large increase to the body fat set point and eventually an increase to the body fat set point. Nowadays, food industries advertise what is called a supernormal stimulus. A supernormal stimulus is a stimulus that causes a stronger response than would a normal stimulus. Food industries specifically design these types of junk food to elicit supernormal consumption and cravings. Junk foods are considered a supernormal stimulus because they are exaggerated stimulus compared to the normal stimulus. In the past, humans have consumed foods such as meats, vegetables, and other types of foods. However, we now have processed food that do not pass the dietary recommendations. Therefore, with more advertisements of these exaggerated stimuli, the more we tend to crave them and form these strong flavor calorie associations.
So, how is it that just the sight of the foods make us feel even hungrier? They're just images. We know it's not healthy and it makes us feel bad afterwards, but companies will spend billions of dollars pushing these products and they are very successful. Are there biases involved in the junk food advertisements, particularly to children? There are some studies that think so. There was one study using an fMRI that found watching advertisements of popular fast food restaurants increased ventral medial prefrontal cortex activation in children. This is an area that we learned in class that is associated with assigning emotional and social meaning to tasks to better guide goal-directed behavior. So what does this have to do with being hungry? We are just looking at images, right? In the study, they asked the children to self-report their hunger levels before they were shown the advertisements. The hungrier the child reported to be, the more activation there was in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. After the advertisements, the children were asked to rate several different types of foods. Things that were of more nutritional sustenance, like fruits and vegetables, were rated very low, while foods like French fries and chips were rated very high. Is this a coincidence? First, let's talk about leptin for a little bit. It is an adipose hormone that acts on the hypothalamus, and it is involved in producing feelings of satiety. When subjects eat high-fat diets, it was shown that they had lowered levels of leptin. When subjects have more adipose tissue, they had high levels of leptin, but there is evidence that there is leptin resistance occurring. That is why leptin as a treatment for obesity has not been very successful. Having inconsistent levels of leptin can make people feel hungry at inappropriate times. Hunger levels can affect how we perceive things like junk food advertisements. It is not a coincidence that when you are already full and you see images or videos of junk food, you crave it less, but if you are hungry, you crave it even more. This is the prefrontal cortex talking. The types of advertisements also matter. In one study, they examined the advertisements in two categories: logical persuasion and non-rational influence. Ads that use logical persuasion are usually very informative, like this one here. Ads that use non-rational influence often contain very vivid imagery and usually do not contain very much objective data, like this one here. When subjects were shown these ads, their anterior cingulate cortex activated more so than when they viewed non-rational influence ads. The anterior cingulate cortex is heavily involved in impulse control. So what does this have to do with bias? Obesity is a public health issue that is accelerated by what people see on TV. These advertisements intentionally use biases to target certain psychological and physiological responses to initiate and perpetuate cravings of their products in hopes of increasing sales and revenue. Junk food advertisements elicit actual neurological and physiological responses that can be linked to a vicious cycle of consuming foods that are low in nutritional value but have an addictive quality. Companies spend billions of dollars on these advertisements. They do not do this randomly.
Now you may ask, how is this relevant to society? Well, nowadays, food industries specifically target children and adolescents to develop brand recognition, preference, and loyalty at an early age. Not only are these food advertisements biased towards children, they are significantly high in fat and sugar. Therefore, they are inconsistent with the national dietary recommendations. Some of the strategies these industries use include unhealthy food advertisements and commercial TV ads, in-school marketing, placement of products, kids clubs, the internet, toys, and products with brand logos. As for advertisements on TV, for every 5 minutes a child spends watching TV, they see about one food commercial. At schools, food sales include soft drinks, sport drinks, snacks, and other types of junk food. They are commonly displayed at vending machines along with school stores. Food and beverage industries also pay to display their advertisements in movies and TV programs. Placement of their products allow viewers to recognize their products at a later time. The most common way to target kids are through the internet. Internet advertisements include entertaining, animated, and interactive activities about their food products. In addition, companies also brand logos on kids' toys and products. This allows young children to develop an early association with the child and displays brand awareness. Recent studies show that children who are exposed to food advertisements had preferences for and choose to advertise food more than children who did not see these type of advertisements. In addition, recent studies have shown a positive correlation between obesity in children and the hours they spend watching TV. For every 1 hour increase in watching TV per day, the children are more likely to consume large amounts of sugary beverages, fast foods, and overall calories. Children who are exposed to more than 3 hours of TV per day are 50% more likely to be obese compared to children who watch less than 2 hours per day. About 50% of the ads on children's shows consist of junk food, and therefore children are rarely exposed to public announcements or advertisements for healthy foods. Food and marketing intentionally targets children who are too young to distinguish advertisements from the truth, and this induces them to eat high-calorie and low-nutrient junk foods. By the age of 2, most children can recognize many products in supermarkets and ask for them by their name.
So what does this all mean? It implies that there is an increasing health issue stemming from junk food advertising targeting children, creating an unfortunate life cycle. As children are exposed to advertisement promoting junk food and consume such things, they are put into a risk of obesity and other major health problems. With the continual exposure, they continue to form relationships with junk food brands, even as they grow older and pass it on to their children, creating a cycle. This also implies that the cycle needs to be broken for the improvement of everybody's health, children and adults alike. This can be done by advertising more healthy foods to children. Though keeping advertisement bias still towards children, at least healthier lifestyles can form. Possible solutions include government regulation on food advertisement, especially on calorie-dense foods, and more education about healthy lifestyles. In addition to the Pavlovian theory of weight, we need to break the strong association between flavors and these supernormal stimulus along with their calories.